will have 1 hour for continuing our thoughts and ideas. We have been joined by two new participants, Dr. Tatiana Volkova and Dr. Arne Sauka, who are both involved in teaching business and finance in Riga in their very own special ways. The order of the day or the hour will be the following, that I will give a little time to our presenters, 2-3 minutes perhaps, to continue any thoughts they missed or want to continue, or maybe they want to reply to some thesis in other presentations, and a little bit more time if they wish to Ms. Volkova and Mr. Stauka to put forward their own thoughts relating to the challenges of business sustainability in the digital age. Maybe we can start with Mr. Ross.
Sure. Thanks very much. Well, I suppose one thing I can do with this little bit of time is let all of you in on a private conversation or aspects of a private conversation that I had with Giannis during the coffee break. Giannis asked me a good question, which was, what about the security threats and the risks that are posed by having AI technology that is designed to transcend its own program? I mean, all the previous generation of computing that we've had, though of course our computers sometimes surprise us by doing things the designers couldn't do themselves, like beating Garry Kasparov in a chess game. Nevertheless, that computer that beat Kasparov, all it could do was play better and better chess. It was programmed to be a chess player, and a chess player was all it could be. But the new generation systems, the large neural networks that I was talking about, are open-ended discovery devices. They're not, if they start behaving in ways we didn't anticipate, there's no program to go back and fix, because they're not programmed machines. They're general purpose learning machines. So this, I mean, I think Giannis was particularly interested in raising the question about the sort of existential risk that such systems can pose to us as a species. And I think that's not an unreasonable thing to worry about. But before we get all the way out there, it's worth devoting some mental energy to a more prosaic aspect of the problem, which is, suppose you're a business and you become dependent on a system like this. You've got your proprietary learning algorithms, and they're part of the key of your business success. How shall we factor in and quantify and manage the risk that goes with the fact that your number one business asset is a thing that might do anything? Okay? And you can't go back in and reprogram it if it starts doing stuff you really, really don't like. I specialize, one of my specialists as an economist is in risk, and I must say that is a head scratcher for me.
So, Mr. Kazorcinch, sorry.
Yes, as you heard, we had a very interesting discussion over coffee. But what I'd like to turn my attention to is the question of values and morality, which also came up. And how can we reconcile our values with artificial intelligence? Do we in some way try to program that in, or does that actually work against the whole principle of trying to find new ways of doing things? And quite apart from artificial intelligence, I would say that the moral question is something that we in the Baltic area are going to have to return to again very soon. And I would put it in this way, that if the West sees the NATO-EU border as a red line, and that is for Obama a real red line. And on the other side, you have the border of the Russian Federation. Well, in between are 70 million people. Do those people not have a right to choose their own form of government, to choose their own economic model, to choose what sort of security structures they want to have? Or because they happen to be between these two red lines, that we accept that the biggest and strongest player in the region can dictate and say to them, this is our sphere of influence, you must do what we, Russia, want. Well, I don't think that's fair. And I would point out to this audience that we, Latvia in particular, only got into NATO by the skin of our teeth. It was a very, very, very close call. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Berzinch?
Very hard to speak after such global challenges, but I'm really very thankful for invitation for this event, and I think it's really extremely important that universities and researchers are closing gaps between reality outside and some research, because yes, it used to be that there is some research from universities, and then there are some consultancy firms and companies, and then there is real business. And just a couple of months ago, I was in one conference where some part of speakers were from so-called consultancy companies, and I felt that, Jesus, it is so big gap already between what they are telling and the reality where business is going, because again, this is exponential, still driven by technology. So even maybe some presentation what I was giving some year ago, I had maybe slightly, but still different thoughts. But guys are trying to tell that marketing is still based on those hamburger principles, that you offer 3 choices for customer, and then he is choosing this middle one. But in nowadays, when sales channel is mobile, who is browsing? So you have to be extremely relevant, extremely precise with individualized offer, not like customer is feeling that his neighbor has the same offer. So rules are so extremely changing so extremely fast. So what I want to wish you that you are constantly looking to close those gaps and really bring together academic and real business, because game is changing. So until now, by the fact I forgot to tell that 2016 is recognized as the year that probably this law, what I mentioned, this Moore law has stopped because Intel recognized that it hit some glass or whatever ceiling of physics. That cooling down, symbolically, cooling down is an issue, that it is now so microscopic, and how to cool down those transistors on silicon. So probably silicon is reaching its borders. Maybe there is now a new generation, but still these opportunities what are released are tremendous. So I think we still have very interesting years ahead, and not only in the borders of industries are really disappearing. I had luxury to work as well for some time, not only in banking, in telco. So I thought that when I will go there, then it's completely different. No, rules of game are the same. So products may be slightly different. But so.
Thank you. So, Ms. Volkova, now your thoughts have definitely been provoked about something, right? So you are free either to continue any of previously expressed like lines of thought, or just to come with your own great ideas for 5-6 minutes. And then we'll have questions from the auditorium.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you all speakers for really delightful thoughts you put in front of us. We are living in this era of complexity, and a growing complexity from all kinds of sources. And it's interesting about those analytical capabilities of data, what is needed to be developed in the companies. And we have to move further for this business sophistication, which requires another level of thinking. And I think we are still, catching this path. How we have to explore and exploit the future, what is coming. And more there are different projects on future agenda. For example, 1,200 leading specialists, experts are working to foresee at least, trends coming up and in what kind of environment we will be living in coming years. It's everything changes so fast, and by conventional methods doing business, it's not anymore possible to sustain business. What does it mean, business sustainability? It means ability to compete today, and to have ability to see those coming patterns, to recognize, to deliver a new value for our customers, to engage in new relationships. It's all business model, all value change are changing, and we have to cope with those challenges. As Girts was saying that in business schools, we have to try to close the gap between reality and what's happening. And as you're coming from United States, you are talking more about big companies. In Latvia, we have also not such sophisticated big companies like Swedbank. Many small and medium companies we have also think about where our students are working. In Latvia, we have 99% small and medium companies, 78% micro. And there is still gap need to be closed. What are the best new management tools, how they apply in those micro, small companies? And we see that many of what we are telling in our business schools are much ahead what is happening in reality in those companies as well. So we have to balance, at least to prepare students to lift off business practices in companies as well, thinking about their future careers and to build those capabilities. One of capability which we try also to develop at Bangkok School is about design thinking, design-driven business models which require different thinking modes. And my understanding is that Latvia now is living in this innovation economy. This national innovation system is not fully tied with those challenges what you are telling us, because they are still, this innovation system looks this more to technological side and not, to have this human in the center and how to develop those capabilities to really come up with new, fresh ideas and to build this creative nation. Yeah, especially for business from side of security. It's again a lot of capabilities need to be developed within the company. At Bangkok School, we started to deliver this cybersecurity governance and management program. As we see, there is still not many companies sending their employees, so students are interested, but we hope this program will develop further. The cybersecurity risks will be again exponentially growing through this Internet of Things. It's a fourth industrial revolution we are experiencing. Yeah? And then what you are saying, if those all things which been connected will start to behave what we don't expect, like self-driving cars and all other new technologies which are introduced already. So it's really different types of tools, methods are needed in order to cope with this complex reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stauka.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is one of those cases when I don't really know what to say, because there has been so many very important aspects raised. I really enjoyed those three presentations, and I've been thinking about this digitalization, information flow, value-added sustainability, all the things that were mentioned from different aspects, security aspects, banking aspects, business development aspects. Now the academia is coming in as a kind of closing the gap with the closing of the gap function. Yet, also academia is some sort of business, and also for this academia, university type of business, this digitalization, sustainability are very, very important issues. And then by listening to all what has been said, I actually started to think that even though we are talking a lot about potential drawbacks of this digitalization, I think we still have to be aware, and probably we are all aware, that that this is reality, and this is reality already for some time, that we live in this digital area, right? And that actually it gives us a lot of potential For instance, you wouldn't be here, I guess, if not the internet. How would we connect you? Once it happened, and it was a year ago or something, in a school, internet failed for a half of the day. As a researcher, I could easily go home because most of the people I work with my research articles are somewhere, Australia, US, Sweden, Germany, UK, whoever, right? So I can't really get in touch with them. All the data source I need as a researcher are stored in a databases that are only available through the internet. In fact, the way value added is created, that in turn provides with sustainability for the companies, goes through this kind of networking of different researchers or practitioners or bankers or whoever. Basically, it does not really matter, are we Indians or Latvians or Americans or French? It's what we know matters. And through this network, we can get these pieces of knowledge and put them together. So that is something I think which we should appreciate. Well, also in the nature, we have storms, we have tsunamis, right? We have things that are created, we have wars that are created by people. And these are drawbacks of the physical reality. There are, of course, certain drawbacks of the cyber reality or whatever the right word for that is. And of course, we have to be aware of this. But maybe the third reality, which we don't know of, will come. And again, the way the people will communicate, the way the technologies allowed us to interact will change. So I mean that is fine. All the realities, including this technology, IT reality, has some benefits and drawbacks. But I think that these benefits are kind of more. So that was my main point here.
Okay, thank you. So I think it is finally time to give opportunity to auditorium to ask questions, express comments. There haven't been too many questions before, so also yes, comments, if they are not too long, they are also very much okay. We have quite a lot of time for that. So, who will be the first? Or I will have to abandon the principle of voluntary questions. Yes, I'm saved.
Well, I do have a question to Don Ross. My name is Jürgen Bleich. I'm a professor for strategic management. And my question is, did I understand you right, that it is like an imperative to have this competencies in artificial intelligence in-house as a university or as a company?
Thanks very much for that question. That's a great question. Not today, not next month, but I'm not going to put any of my money in a company that isn't thinking about this and isn't thinking about it with some serious attention. Also, I think any business school, at least if it's a large business school, I mean, there are little small business schools with very well-developed niches, or small business schools that are the dominant players in small countries, and thus gain a kind of protection, some buffering from the global competition through that. Might be able to be a little bit slower in adoption, but a large university that depends on maintaining and indeed growing a very large student base for its survival, or a company that depends on having significant growth in its customer numbers, if they're not developing a plan, they're in deep trouble because they'll be taken out by the next best positioned business school or company that does have a plan.
So maybe you allow me a funny thought. I was thinking about how to make you rich. Maybe
very
you
much.
are rich, even richer. And I thought, wouldn't it be an option to have this competency in an own company? So not invest your money into 3D printers, but in an own company, exactly offering this service to other institutions so that you could become best in class and offer it to organizations that cannot afford to develop this competency?
Thanks. Yeah, sure. Getting rich is a fine ambition for anyone, as Deng Xiaoping said, that well-known short capitalist. What the actual state of play, as I very briefly indicated in my remarks, is that there are companies of that sort popping up at a very high frequency these days, and so far the business play that most of them have been falling into is punting one catchy sounding idea that grabs the attention of one of the big behemoths, and then they get bought up. So we're almost certain to go through at least a phase where the big rollouts are going to come from the Googles and the Amazons, just because they're going to have the capital to put behind, and they're acquiring the patents on the ideas. But we also, I think we can be I think we can be optimistic, because large companies like that almost inevitably cripple themselves through their own bureaucratic control processes. We can be pretty sure that Amazon and Google are going to have some really good ideas they own and they won't follow up. And some near variant of that really good idea will be punted and will be pushed onto the market by some startup company we've never heard of yet. And I'd like to own that company, yeah.
Maybe just one more thought to add this and to complement what you said. Today is in the news that the negotiation between Apple, BMW and Daimler was stopped. So, and there are two reasons. Yeah, exactly. This was my feeling as well. So the first reason is they couldn't make an agreement on who would be the leading partner in this project to develop the iCar. And the second one is probably the most important reason. This is what you said as well. They couldn't agree on who would own the data and who would make the decisions about what to do with the data. This is exactly what you said. Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, other questions, comments? Yes.
First of all, let me thank all our keynote speakers for nice presentations, but I have two questions. Is it allowed to ask just two questions to two gentlemen? Yeah, if possible. My first question will be to Dirt. It's really very nice and interesting about digitalization and other aspects of commercial banks, but I am wondering about future. What do you predict and what could you forecast and what do you expect about future collaboration model or maybe striking, fighting model, I don't know, between banks, between commercial banks and fintech, mobile, online service providers and so on. What's your own personal opinion and what do you predict? And maybe my second question just now to Mr. Kazhocinch, what do you think about the main, I don't know, threats or maybe main problems, issues that could occur in our security due to digitalization? That could impact our business because of cybersecurity issues, because of wide digitalization of our business. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, very valid question. I don't pretend to be kind of this oracle. I don't have crystal ball, but sometimes I try to extrapolate some trends, and especially from other industries, and think that how it applies to the banking. And here I think we can find some similarities that First of all, once more that banks and banking probably will start to separate as a terms. What I mean, banks, that's regulator keeping of customers' money, providing enough capital and so on and so forth. Banking, it's more like on this relationship part, and we know this Bill Gates statement that banks are needed, but probably not to run banking, yeah, or whatever it was. That there could be another intermediaries who can provide this whole customer experience. And I think this is really a turning point if banks will not, in a way, invest or really apply the design thinking. So respect that if you are teaching it, just small jump aside that I had luxury to visit some fintech companies in Silicon Valley, and one company said, oh, we are applying design thinking. I thought, okay, you are recruiting some designer, and that's no Johnny Ive from Apple, whatever. But then another said design thinking, and then I dig deeper into the matter and understood, wow, this is actually some philosophy, how you create services. And by the way, it's not very new. It's from 70s or 80s, and just now it sounds differently. That main topic, if you want to do this banking, is really uses design thinking to be extremely customer empathetic. Which is not usually the case for the banks, because banks are, again, historically, digitalization started from back office. So, and automatically you think from inside out. Yeah, you will go direction of, yeah, we know, we go direction in mobile, we go direction of big data and so on. So you create value streams inside the organization who are digging into that direction. Fine. Then you are producing the product, and then it turns out that this product is not even exactly how those internal stakeholders thought, because each is thinking from that direction. Where is the problem? Problem is that there is tendency that companies are not formulating outcome exactly from customer's point of view. If I would say that in order to be successful tomorrow, I need the customer sees highly individualized offer which he in mobile, which he activates just with one click, yes and no, and then count backwards what is needed to be done. But tendency is to, yes, we need big data, we need mobile, and then they are not meeting exactly how customers would appreciate it. So if big banks or organizations will crack this, they will be in this banking, in this relationship, applying design thinking probably. If not, no problem. Banks will be around, but then they will provide those utility components to somebody else who is stepping into this customer experience. Because currently banks are more like selling tools. Again, you don't have a need a mortgage loan, or you don't have a need even a payment. You want to improve your life, but now banking is pushing you to buy it and assemble yourself to this final need. So I believe that in future, banks who want to be in banking, or any organization who wants to be in banking, has to step up into this value chain. Yeah? If you are providing leasing and you have as your partners car dealers, why not to arrange a service when you see that previous time you got leasing was 3-4 years ago. Then for customer, now switch keys, and just this it's prolonged for next time for the next repayment. And I, as intermediary, I can negotiate for you, because I have customer base of 700,000 active customers. I can negotiate for you the price what you never would get. Yeah, so. Those who will step up, I think, will be in customer relations. Those who will not step up, probably they will exist, but we will not see them. They will be those invisible suppliers of pipes or whatever. So.
Thank you, Dirk, but let me disagree a little bit with you,
Okay.
if possible.
No.
Because you are IT guy, and
I'm not.
but it seems so, because
No.
I'm
He's my
so-
professor, by the way, from university.
I'm sorry, but it seems that you forget a little bit about such very important service of the bank, like advising, like consultants of customers, and me, like personal, I would like to be advised what deposit should be better, could be better, or maybe some advice about mortgage service and something like this. And if I'm corporate customer, like big company, I also need my own personal banker or something like this. And maybe this is also some space for banks to be better than fintech or mobile banking, no?
That's actually easy. Professor Ross' presentation.
Yeah.
It answers the question because, for example, some 10 years ago, one internet investment boutique appeared called Charles Schwab. Yeah. Yes, they put advisors through internet connecting to final customers. Now Charles Schwab openly admits that their business model is so-called robo-advisor. So this artificial intelligence, no, maybe not yet that level, self-learning or so on, but still analyzing patterns in, I don't know, 99% of cases for mass market, it would be extremely enough. Yeah. For this 1%, yes, there is probably your private banker as another trend. Cars were mentioned. Yeah? So I've heard that if you have a child until age of 5 maybe now, probability that he will never drive a car himself, at least on public roads, it's close to 1. So, no, or 100, how you measure it. So the same here about this advisory in banking. Most of cases, it's probably Watson from IBM or whomever will be better if it can beat Kasparov, and now as well in this don't remember English name for these games, and yeah, advisory is simpler than play of chess. So.
As far as digital threats are concerned, for states, the three areas are espionage, sabotage, and subversion. Now, I would argue that for businesses, even relatively small businesses, it's the same, only in slightly different ways. And most businesses succeed, and as we heard earlier, with the advent of AI, there will be knowledge which competitors will want to try to gather. And that means that your business undoubtedly will be subject to espionage, for a start. Sabotage, well, that could be from business rivals. It could be from for quite different reasons. It could be a form of terrorism, but it's certainly something that everybody needs to be thinking about. And as far as subversion is concerned, if you have some very able people, and we know that most businesses do depend on a few very able people, maybe AI will change that, but probably not in the near future. And then the subversion side of it is when your rivals try to entice your best people away. And all of that, of course, is in the, if we're looking at security in the broader sense, then critical infrastructure and the extreme vulnerability of critical infrastructure, the huge vulnerabilities that the Internet of Things is going to open up. And how on earth do you keep the software up to date on your fridge and your cooker and your car and everything else when we can't even be bothered to keep our computers at home up to date, or in many cases we're too lazy to. That is a problem. And of course, if you have autonomous systems, then those autonomous systems can be hacked, and that's another way of getting into you and your ecosystem. I will finish off by saying that that is why this university has the master's course now on digital security, and I really would recommend it enormously, because there is no, in my mind, there is no question that there exists a huge gap between management, particularly top management, and those people who deal with digital issues on a day-to-day basis. top management has a very, very broad brush idea of how their IT systems work. Sometimes it accords with reality, often it doesn't. The people on at the working level, they know how to get the wires connected and who's connected to what and roughly what security systems there are. And the two aren't able to communicate to each other. In other words, those who are in a position to be able to improve, to provide a better service for management in order for management to be able to fulfill their medium and long-term goals by better use of digitalization, don't know who to talk to, and those at the bottom end don't understand what those aims are because they've never been taught in those sort of terms. And that's why this master's course aims to provide the bridge between these two things so that these people who've completed this course have a much more broad understanding of what management is really trying to achieve and what sort of tools might be available. They don't have to do it themselves. They just need to know where to go and look, who to talk to, and how to prevent the sort of threats which I mentioned earlier.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your thoughts, because what came to my mind, I just would like to add and prolong this discussion, because you illustrated how in companies there is a gap of thinking between those technically minded people and chief executives, but what is the latest theories around building sustainable organizations? It's about holistic approach to business, that everything needs to be integrated, and we are still, you know, divided those different functions by different thinking vocabulary. People don't understand each other. And by reading recent literature, there is more and more evidence about how more of those functional managers need to be delegated to top level to work together in teams to make decisions, like chief design officer, chief innovation officer, chief information officer, chief human resource, chief, you know, marketing, because those decisions impact daily activities, and if you are not being a part of this decision-making process, like then we have those results at the bottom interpreted different way, and we don't understand why we are doing this and what we are aiming to achieve at the end of the day. Yeah? This is a different way to look to organization by integrating all aspects and also inviting those to share different perspectives and find those gaps to be closed. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Yes, thank you. I'm Zona Zebota, doing postdoctoral research at the BA School of Business and Finance, and also working for the University of Latvia. And thank you very much for this morning's very interesting presentations. And I have also two questions, if I may, to Mr. Ross and to Mr. Kažociņš. When I was listening to your presentation, Mr. Ross, I thought about future of our universities and how many challenges they are facing, and so how much they should do to become digital universities of the future. Also, not just from the point of view of universities who have to change a lot and maybe to have a lot of advancement in their structures and courses and so on, but also about from point of view of children who are now studying in schools, because the change is taking place on a very at a very small age. We can say that we have a digital generation growing up now. Our children know how to use all these devices which their grandparents don't understand. Also for studying and what universities are teaching, they need creativity. So we need, the universities are trying to teach creativity, and creativity actually is the thing which businesses expect to have from their employers, and how creative one can be growing up with the digital skills only, like not reading books, for example. Like maybe you can share your vision about how the future university will look like and what we are going to, what challenges they are going to face in 10 and 20 years. And for Mr. Kažociņš, I had such a thought that imagine if we have, in a worst case scenario, if we have a kind of conventional attack and we get cut off of like all digital means, so we stay without internet, telephone, any connections. Like, is it theoretically possible at all? And is there any scenario in that case, like what we are going to do on a human level? So what's the aspect for human security in such a situation? Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm very pleased to answer the question about, to have an opportunity to speak about the University of the Future. It's something I'm sort of tasked with wrestling with by a major institution at the moment. I think that one feature of the successful University of the Future will be that it will either be quite large, or it will be joined up in a really effective consortium with other smaller places, right? There are, I mean, a major, the single biggest source of pressure and stress on the university system in most of the world right now is scale efficiency, is being raised by scale efficiencies. It's that costs have risen too fast for efficient management of increased demand. Now, and for reasons I briefly indicated in the lecture, online technology can massively help with that. It's in fact by far the biggest single grounds for optimism to think that the system will get through. But then, the natural worry that arises, the more emphasis one puts on online education, is the critic says, well, but wait a minute. One of the crucial features of a university, as you said in your question, is to empower people to be, students to be creative. And another crucial feature that universities have played is forging students into networks and forging and providing students with the human skills to be able to work in teams and to be able to respond empathetically and professionally at the same time. I mean, those are not natural skills for people, to be professional and empathetic at once. But a successful business person or a successful leader has to be both of those things. Now, for that reason, I would not predict that distance technology, distance delivery technology, will ever completely crowd out face-to-face interaction. I think there will always be a call for some of that. But I think face-to-face interaction will come to be thought of as something one does from time to time, right? Something one uses to supplement the main channel through which interaction occurs, which will be digital for two reasons. It'll be digital because efficiency will simply require it whenever we're interacting on very large scales. But it'll also be mainly digital because, as you also suggested in your question, the students of the future are going to be psychologically quite different from us. These children who grow up swiping iPads before they can speak, and I know some 1-year-old, 1.5-year-olds who swipe away on their iPads, but they can't talk yet, right? So that's more natural than for them, and even for some of our current students at the University of Cape Town. We took a class, a very large class of 1,600, and we pulled it out of its gigantic lecture theater a few years ago and put the whole thing online. And one of the it was a sort of experiment. We made sure that we controlled the level of difficulty of the assignments and so on, so that we could compare it with the previous year's classroom versions. Student performance improved on every metric. And one of the big worries that the critics had was, what about the slower students? What about the students from disadvantaged backgrounds, a major issue in South Africa? What about students who come from townships and where they didn't grow up with computerized homes and with fancy technology? Won't they be particularly disadvantaged further because they're not going to have the native digital skills? In fact, when we broke the data down, and we asked which students were most benefited, all the students in general, as I said, their performance improved, their rates of handing in work on time the course evaluations were better. But who improved the most? The formerly disadvantaged students. And when we analyzed to say why had this been particularly advantageous to them, the answer was they'd been able to interact more. Because when in a huge classroom, they were constantly being crowded aside by the more confident, better prepared, more fluent students. But just with the slightly greater level of anonymity created by the virtual environment, they felt able to speak up and participate. And so they actually had more conversations with their tutors, live conversations, but by Skype, video conversations, and so on. Last comment, though. It's very, very important that the university of the future is going to have to put a huge amount of energy into making sure that those virtual environments that it creates are highly structured and highly interactive and require people to have lots and lots and lots of real-time direct to and fro. We've built that into our online platform at UCT, and any university that tries to do education on the cheap, yes, you can get the scale efficiencies, but if you think that it's a good strategy to push your students out to the margins and reduce the amount of time that somebody needs to spend interacting with those students, you've made a terrible mistake. And one of our rule at UCT is we don't sign it, we won't recruit any student into any online program until we've satisfied ourselves that that student is going to have just as rich an experience as they would have if they came into one of our classrooms. In fact, our goal is make sure they have, let's use the technology to give them a richer experience than we can give them in the classroom.
Okay, being cut off. When I was talking about anti-access area denial, what that actually means is, in the case, for instance, if Russia were to have a major adventure in the Baltic states, the use of missiles, cruise missiles, or Iskander ballistic missiles to destroy airport facilities in which allies could come to reinforce us, to have an air defense system which would deny the 82nd Airborne the opportunity of flying in parachutists to come and help us. It's these sort of things. But actually the question you ask is even more important, because when we are talking about digitalization, we ought to be talking about communication and information systems. Communications is at the base of it all. It's not the little bits of electronics we hold in our hands or have in front of us. It is the huge cables which connect them all. And I mentioned the Gerasimov doctrine. General Gerasimov and his general staff are very able people. And there are some extremely able people in the Chinese general staff as well. And believe me, they are looking at these sort of things. And we know that they are looking, for instance, at transatlantic cables. If you can cut transatlantic cables, that means a hell of a lot. If you can destroy satellites, that means a hell of a lot. When I was a young officer a million years ago in the Royal Artillery, we were starting to get the first computers in for gun data. And even at that time, I have to say I was very disappointed that the answer to what goes wrong with the computer is, well, we have a backup computer, because electromagnetic pulse will destroy all of the computers. And if you haven't learnt how to fire your artillery from firing tables and a map, then you can't do your job. And the same is true now. The Russian armed forces actually have jamming devices which jam GPS reception, which means that all those weapon systems that we think give us a technological advantage, ho, 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 probably won't work the way they're supposed to, because there is something on the other side which doesn't let it happen. So what does it mean in terms of the question you asked? Well, it's a question of vulnerabilities and redundancy. If we think in terms of what sort of cables we have, then that almost gets into the area of state secrets and critical infrastructure. But if you think about it logically, where is the most vulnerable place for cables in Latvia? Well, you know, it's pretty obvious, really. If those cables were cut, we would find it very difficult to communicate. That means that we have to find alternative ways, more redundancy. In particular, it is a question of getting information to your own population and getting information about what is happening within your country, objective information out. And that is why also the Russian electronic aspects of the Crimean invasion were every bit as professional as the purely military. It was an incredibly professional operation to overcome armed forces which are considerably larger than the Russian ones were, virtually without a shot being fired and without anybody being killed. I mean, that's very good. But being able to cut communication with, for armed forces with their headquarters and giving false information as if it's come from the headquarters, which prevents units from doing what they think they ought to do, these are real threats, which is incidentally one of the reasons why Latvia changed legislation recently to make it the duty of commanders under those circumstances to do their duty and defend our country. Redundancy means don't rely just on your optic cables. Don't rely on your mobile telephone systems, because they will not be there when you really need them. Make sure that there are other things available, other ways of both getting information out and also critically communicating with your own population. Because if something were to happen, then the information war will be one of the most critical parts of it. And of course, this is being thought about, but obviously at a classified level.
Thank you. That was very, very impressive. Another question, comment? Yes.
Thank you. I was interested in the phrase that you used, objective knowledge and factual knowledge. And the internet has made the democratization of information obviously possible and proliferates all over. But just on a very micro level, for example, last night I was doing a search for a good restaurant in Riga. And I had this whole list of restaurants with, lots of reviews, but I've become so cynical about them that it's like, oh, that's, the restaurant writing their own review. So how, the challenge is, I can get lots of information, but I have no real means of judging the authority and the reliability of that information. And how does one address that?
In Riga, the answer is a little booklet called Riga in Your Pocket, which does not take advertising and has been going for a long time. And on the whole, I would say, maybe my colleagues can agree, it provides pretty objective information about restaurants in particular, mostly up to date. It's available on the internet and also as a little publication in Narvesen. But the point you make is much more serious than restaurants. And this is where Putin's whataboutism is so powerful. They're not saying that Russia is better than the West, but they're saying the West is just as bad as Russia. And they're saying that there is no objective truth. So MH17, well, you may say that a Buk missile blew it out of the sky, but it could equally have been an attempt to shoot down Putin's plane. It could have been a Ukrainian Air Force jet flying well above the capability of that aircraft anyway. It could have been a lightning strike. And if you put as much as possible of this in, and say, as RT does, well, question everything, then you end up in the Russian way of looking at things, that there is no objective truth. There are a number of different ways of looking at it, and you choose your political orientation and interpret things in terms of political orientation. Now, that is something that we really have got to fight against. It is very, very damaging, and it's very damaging to what we call European values. This is where we get back into the question of morality, because if everybody is as bad as everybody else, and you can break rules and you can kill people and get away with it, well, then we are in a Hobbesian world. And I don't think that is what Europe is about. Europe has gone through some very difficult times in the past, including in the late 70s, early 80s. But I'm sure we will get through this one as well. But we're going to really have to get our act together rather better than we have up to now.
Thank you. I think we still have time for one question, or 1.5. Sometimes it's formulated like that in academic events. Yes.
Thanks for giving me this opportunity. I would like to ask Dr. Ross. I would like to introduce myself. I'm a PhD student here at BA, and I was listening to these conversations regarding digital future and digital intelligence. What do you think the role of the lecturers and professors in near future regarding this digital intelligence and this? And obviously, it has to be a kind of a differentiative approach, or how do you think it can bridge the gap between tradition to this digital?
Sure. Thanks very much. So, you know, all revolutions build things, and all revolutions also cause some value to be lost. There's no such, you know, there's no revolution doesn't do away with some good things. And for thousands of years, the thousands of years in which we have had universities, every year, all over the world, brilliant lectures have been delivered. And at any given time, there have been masters of the art of the sustained lecture. And I think that is an art that is going to largely go extinct. I mean, there will be TED Talks, but a TED Talk is not a sustained lecture. Well, how long does a TED Talk last? 3 minutes? 5 minutes? It is an unfortunate aspect of the nature of digital interaction that it shortens the units of communication. It's the most successful professors increasingly these days are those who have learned to, as the phrase goes, flip their classroom. That is, instead of bringing the students into the classroom and delivering a sustained lecture to the students, the professor provides the students with a carefully managed knowledge ecosystem, helps the student learn their way around that ecosystem. When they bring the students into the classroom, whether that classroom is a physical classroom or a virtual classroom, and the virtual classroom, as I've tried to make clear, can be just as richly interactive or even more so than the physical one. But when the students and the tutors and the professor are all together, increasingly the mode of communication is not professor-centered. It's not the professor at the apex and everybody else quiet and passive and taking in information. One of the changes we're seeing in the psychology of the new generation of digital native students is the nature of their attention allocation system is just different. And we might regret the fact that these students, the modern student, I think, is actually not as capable as her parents or her grandparents at sitting there for 45 minutes and still successfully processing information at minute 40. But it's just true. It's worth remembering, though, was her grandmother or her mother still really processing information very effectively at minute 40? She was sitting there. but how much was then, when we're talking, of course, about ourselves here, right? So the role of we can, I think the short answer to your question is the role of the professor will increasingly be that of preparing a challenging knowledge commons for the students. When I first flipped a classroom at UCT quite a number of years ago, one of the ways I structured the assignments for the students was I provided them with far more information than they could possibly process, and I gave them tasks that were designed to put pressure on them to try and make skillful judgments on the basis of relatively superficial features of which information pathways they should go down, in what order. And they were graded partly on the basis of how efficiently did they manage to separate the wheat from the chaff. That's a skill that wasn't so important for me, and it wasn't so important for my father, but it's really, really important for my grandson.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, you probably heard earlier that the question of human free will in the age of artificial intelligence, it's becoming a bit tenuous. I was ready to invoke this issue if you hadn't asked questions, but you did it. Thank you. So it was not necessary. One more thing. Mr. Kažociņš pointed out that electronics is very vulnerable, but paper and ink is robust. Yes, it is so, but there can still be mistakes in a printed form. And here in your program on page 7, there is one event which is supposed to start after the conference is over tomorrow, which is not possible, of course. So it will start at 10 o'clock tomorrow, not 15. So thank you. That was really, really interesting discussion, which really forced to think about security in the deeper sense, how robust and how fragile are physical things and networks and relationships and knowledge on which we depend upon. So thank you very much, dear panelists. Thank you, auditorium, and lunch, right?
But before lunch, one final event. Our thank you to all presentations. It was very inspirative and worthwhile. Thank you for comments. And as the sign of joining to ASBBMC Brotherhood, this certificate to everybody of you. And Dr. Don Ross.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much.
Gits Bērziņš. Jānis Kažociņš. Tatjana Volkova, doktor, profesor. Dr. Arnis Sauka. And finally, moderator Pēteris Strautiņš. And just and small gift, which I will give you. Umbrella. Yeah. Not digital, but a real umbrella. And we will continue after lunch our parallel sessions. Thank you very much.